This is a Tandy TV Game Console, and I'm sure quite a few of you will think of it as a blast from the past. Let's say this thing was produced in the early 70s, and it was a precursor, or I would say the granddaddy of all video games that would be produced later on in the 80s and the 90s, and still even up to today. Now I really have no clue whether it works or not. This is how I found it in the shop, lying piled under all sorts of rubbish in a box. And the shop owner couldn't tell me whether it worked or not. Quite a few of you who are watching this video have fond memories of owning such an early video game console. Well, like I said, I don't know if it works or not, so what I would do is I would hook it up to a power supply and then to a small TV and see if it works. Unfortunately for me, the DC input, which is here, doesn't tell what the plus and what the ground is of the power supply. Now I could go for it and just hook it up with the plus being the center pin and or the end pin of the power jack. I have jacks, that I could use to connect it up. I have plenty of jacks, and as it turns out, this tiny little jack here, okay, this one here, would fit perfectly. But I don't want to take risks, okay? I don't want to burn this thing, because if it works, well, that would be really nice. So the very first thing I'm going to do is open it up. Okay, to open up the video game, you need to unscrew a number of screws, and I identified 4 of them, one under each leg of the video game. I'm going to unscrew one and show you. Okay, here's the first one. So yeah, it's a Phillips screw. So let's see what's inside. Oh, it's snagging on something. Okay, wait, maybe I can see something here. Ah, okay, I see. It's snagging on the springs of the battery compartment. Okay, well, this is just as new to me as it is to you guys, so there you go. And that's what's inside. Oops, I dropped the screws. Okay, no biggie. Well, well, well. What do we see here? Well, I see a couple of big chips here and there. I see something which obviously goes to the TV cable, okay, and that's this little module here. So I'm guessing this is the modulator, the TV modulator, and it's a little bit sticky. I also see a few crystals. I see a crystal here, and I see one here. So I'm guessing those crystals are providing for an oscillator of some sort. Now, mind you, I don't have a schematic for this video game, so if there's anything wrong with it, I'll have to find out by trying to figuring out the circuit. I'm going to unmount the PCB from the case to have a closer look, and first of all I'm going to unmount the jacks at the back of the video game. I already unmounted the power supply jack, which seems to be, I think, a 2mm jack, and now there's another 2mm for the rifle pistol interface. So a 2mm and a 3.5mm, and then another 3.5mm right at the end of the case, so right here for the motorcycle control, the speed control. Next I'm going to release the PCB from the case. Normally the button, the game selector switch, or button really, should come right off if you pull. Oh yeah, and it does. Yeah. So let me see if you can see it. So I lift it gently. There it goes. So yeah, it sits on a knurled shaft inside the game. So there's a screw here at the top, and then there's one more right here, and then there's one more at the other side of the PCB here, and one more, well, two more in the middle of the circuit board, here and here. So there are 5 screws in all to undo. Okay, the PCB is unscrewed, so now I can release the cables. There you go. I also released the speaker from its little spot inside the case, which is right here. It was held in by 2 little clamps. So I undid that as well. It's just a plain brown case with a battery holding area, nothing special. Okay. So, and a neat little thing is the gauze they put over the speaker. Like that. Now let's see if I can lift it out, partially at least, and that would allow us a closer look at what's underneath. Okay, well, nothing spectacular here. Okay, there's a small PCB underneath for the game buttons. Also, another little detail that I noticed just now is that you see the wires for the controller. Okay, so the controller are these little brown things on top. This, okay, you can just lift them up out of the case. Well, the wires are stuck to the case with just tape, plain tape, like this. Very sticky, and that's it, you know. But it's such a dirty thing to do. I mean, it's so cheapo. But okay, I guess that's what they did back then. You know, they went for the cheap and effective, quote unquote, which in this case would be tape. But I hate tape. Hang on, what did I say a few minutes ago? I don't want to take risks, okay? I don't want to burn this thing. Yeah. Before I get carried away and disassemble more of the game console, let's test it out first on a TV. Now, before I switch on or try to switch on the game console, I should say this is a Pong game console, okay, so it's not NTSC. Okay, well, the back of the game console said channel 36, so let's switch it on first. Oh, we have sound here. Okay, but no image. Let me see, channel 36. Hey, hey, hey! There we go. Oh yes. It seems to be working. Of course, I'm not using the paddle for the moment, so, but at least without trying out the paddle it seems to work. Let me see, can I move the paddle? Oh yeah, I can. Nice. Well, it's a bit shaky though. Okay, the whole front panel is attached by 6 screws. So there are 2 on the opposite corners on the right side, 2 in the middle, and 2 on the opposite corners on the left side. There are those strange little metal caps that I don't quite yet know what the function is of, but they are glued to the cabinet of the game console. So anyway, I released the 6 screws, so let's have a look now what happens if we give it a little nudge. Okay, I lifted out the game console's switch panel together with the CPU PCB, and there you have it. That's all of it unmounted. Now I had to wriggle a bit the front panel because it was sort of stuck into the cabinet with some, well, I would say old glue. It might not be glue exactly. It might be a kind of silicone they used. I unsoldered the game paddles from their contacts, and the contacts are, let me take a pointer and show you. So the game console paddles are soldered to these 3 points you see here. This is the common, so to which the shielding of the cables is soldered, and this is one paddle, and this is the other. Then I also unsoldered the battery connectors, okay, or the wires at least. Okay, so here's the keyboard of the game console, completely removed from the cabinet. And as you can see, the switches are rather a cheap kind of, well, plastic switches, as are these keys here, and they are held in by a smaller PCB mounted to the front panel. And as you can tell, there are quite a few screws at the back here. I counted them. There are exactly 15 screws to undo. Oh my. I'm not sure I want to do this, but I'm afraid I'll have to. Anyway, you also see the wire loom attached to the keyboard. And funnily enough, so there are 15 wires running from the main board to the keyboard, but at the factory they did mark that there are 15 pins to keyboard. So let's get started. As you can tell, the little screws that hold down the keyboard are all Phillips screw style screws. So and they're tiny, they are really tiny. Okay, I released the back panel of the switches, and now I'm going to lift it up. Now I could feel some sort of spring action on this top panel, so I'm going to carefully lift it and see what's behind this. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, there are a number of buttons with sliding contacts. You can see them gleaming there at the back. Let's see if I can focus a little bit. Yeah. Okay, well, let's unmount the whole thing and then have a closer look at one of those switches. Well, this is the keyboard completely disassembled, and as you can tell, the switches are like little, let's see if I can focus there, so like little springy pieces of metal which are held in place by a plastic knob. Okay, and you can see that those springy metal contacts have a sort of a double contact. Okay, and if you look at the PCB of the keyboard, you can see that a contact really consists of a wide pad and a smaller pad underneath, or in this case above it, and those double contacts slide over the whole pad and make either contact with the smaller pad or they break it. well, I would tend to say crude but effective. Interestingly enough, there are some traces on the keyboard which are interrupted by a hole. Now, it does look intentional, but I really have no clue why they did that. Okay, and there are several traces like that. You see, there's a trace here which is interrupted by a drill hole. Same here. And same over there. So that's peculiar. My guess is they probably noticed at the factory that some contacts were not needed, and therefore they, instead of designing a new PCB, they simply drilled through the traces they wouldn't need. Okay, well, it's primitive as solution, but it worked. Okay, a little bit more information. In fact, this game console doesn't contain one game console, but actually two. And I'll explain to you why I'm saying that. So you see the two large chips. Okay, so you see this one. This is an AY3 8500 chip from General Instruments. And then you see an AY3 8765 from General Instruments. Okay, so both are game processors. Now, the AY3 8500 is also called the Pong chip. Okay, so this chip contains all the paddle kind of games, you know, where you have to hit a ball and hit it back and forth over a play field. And this happens to be this chip. It contains 6 or 7 variations of Pong. It's also the PAL or the PAL version you see down there. Okay, so this is called the Pong chip. This, on the other hand, the AY3 8765, is the PAL version of the motorcycle chip. And this contains, in fact, a complete motorcycle game where you can run a tiny motor bicycle avatar over all sorts of obstacles and courses. Okay, it's a rather primitive game, but nonetheless they designed a whole processor to contain just that one game and its levels. So yeah, there you have it. You have two games or two game consoles for the price of one. By the way, both chips seem to have been produced in 1978. So that would mean that this specific console could not be, let's say, older than 1978. Okay, I'm going to clean the knobs of the game console, and for that purpose I have a bottle of soapy water. I used a little bit of detergent in about a bit less than half a liter of water. I don't need much more, and in any case I can reuse it a bit later on when we're going to clean other parts of the game console. So what are we going to clean exactly? Well, we're going to clean the main selector button. That's one. And then we're going to clean the set buttons of the game console. Okay, and they have these nifty little springs inside. Okay, so you see it's like a small plastic plunger with a very small spring on top. But we're not going to clean these things, okay, because they could get lost easily. So let's take them out. All these buttons will go into the ultrasonic cleaner as well. So let's grab them. And oh, by the way, this looks like blue on the screen, but in real life it looks almost like a grayish pale blue, while on the screen it looks almost dark blue. Well, darker blue. Very strange. The same thing with orange. The orange on the button is darker than the orange you see on the screen. So apparently my camera seems to make color compensation. Very interesting detail. Okay, so in they go. Two more. Okay, and then we have the selector buttons, and interestingly enough, let me show you, the selector buttons have like a little mica on top. I don't know if you can see the mica, but let's see if I can focus on the button. There, you can see the mica on top of it. So all the slider buttons have these little micas on top. I don't know why exactly. I mean, if it's supposed to keep out the dust and dirt from the video game console, well, then it's an absolute fail. We're not going to dump them into the cleaner. So I'm going to remove them one by one. 7. Again, in real life these look more like tan, a darker tan color, while on camera they look more like a kind of washed off tan color. Very strange, this color compensation. Anyway, in they go. Oops, dropped one. So there you are. There are all the parts. So now let's add the cleaning liquid. I didn't use a lot of detergent, just a few drops really, but I do use lukewarm water, so I would say about 45 degrees C, something like that. There you go. Oops, that's a bit much. Okay, well, there they are. Now we're going to program the cleaner for about 30 minutes and let it clean all the parts. Well, since my ultrasonic cleaner is still standby, why not use it right now to clean the other parts of the game as well? So I'm going to open up the paddles, you know, with which you play the game, and clean the cases and repair them where necessary. I do know that the potentiometers need a good cleaning as well, probably with contact cleaner, and I might even disassemble the gun and the speed paddle or control that's used for the motorcycle game, and clean that as well. And here's what's on the inside of a paddle. Like I thought, just a simple potentiometer mounted to the front of the paddle, and a wire running through the back of the paddle to the video game, and it's a 1 mega ohm. Alright, and here are the covers of the game paddles. Now there is something weird going on with the plastic, and I really have no idea what it is. I mean, this is how they came out of the ultrasonic cleaner, and look at that. There seems to, the cleaning seems to have revealed a kind of a weak spot in the plastic. Well, that's how I would describe it, but it's really peculiar. And in fact, let me see, yeah, the other game paddle has the same thing, the same kind of whitish deposit, but in no particular pattern. It's really weird. It seems to be some sort of a weak spot in the plastic itself. So the next thing we need to clean is the game paddle for the motorcycle game. Well, it's actually not a paddle, but more like a speed control. So the only way to disassemble this is by taking out the little screw there at the end, where my finger is, and then I suppose the top comes off, and if I'm careful, I think I can just unmount the potentiometer on top of it. And that's what's on the inside of the speed control. Well, not much, just a piece of wire, and then the potentiometer on the screw to the top of the potentiometer, and it's a 100 kilo ohm potentiometer. Alright, it took me a minute or two to figure it out, but in the end it turns out not to be that difficult. What you need to do actually is, you see that little part on top of the strain relief, the rubber part. Let me take a pointer and show it. So this part here, okay, is clamped inside this opening. Well, on the other side, of course. So what it really took was that I took my needle nose pliers, so very long flat needle nose pliers, and I squeezed gently this tip of the strain relief, and while I was squeezing this part, here on the inside, I kept a steady pull on this part here with my other hand, and pushing off of the back of the control with my fingers of my other hand, and keeping this between my thumb and my index finger. So it took a little bit of strength and endurance, but in the end, after having squeezed this part sufficiently, it just narrowly managed to pass through this opening, giving it a good tug. The next thing I need to do is to unsolder the wires from the potentiometer, and that's it. Oh, by the way, I might lose the label which says pass here. I think it was a label they stuck on it at the factory after testing it, but it's nothing special or peculiar. I think if I lose this label, I can still emulate it by making printing one of my own on some printer. I forgot to mention one important detail. If you look closely at the wires, you'll see that the one on top, is completely light gray, whereas the other one, the one at the bottom, is half white, half gray. So if you turn it around, so now you see the white side. If you turn it around, you'll see that it's gray on the other side. See? And it's my opinion that the white and gray wire is actually ground. Nope, I got it all wrong. It's not the white and gray which is ground, it is the full gray wire, so this one here, which is ground. I attached one end of my multimeter to the ground of the jack of the control, and watch the meter when I touch this wire here. Let me see. There you go. 1.6 ohms. Okay, well, that's probably the resistance of the wire itself. Alright, so we cleaned almost every part of the Tandy Game Console. There is one part left to clean, and that's the gun. Now, unfortunately for me, I'm missing one part of the gun. Either I missed it entirely in the antique shop, which is a shame in that case, or it simply wasn't there. To disassemble the gun, you need to take out 3 screws. So there's one here, there's one there, and then there's one in the grip. Okay, and they are connected to nuts on the other side. Okay, except perhaps here. I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm thinking it's a full nut, so a domed nut. Alright, I took out 3 long screws, and as you can tell, they are of different length. The last 2 perhaps not so much, but the third one is certainly longer by a few millimeters. Now, as soon as I took out those 3 screws, the gun the gun pretty much fell apart. I kept it together so that we can both discover what's inside the gun. So let me lift up one half of it. Okay, here we go. So this is the trigger mechanism on the inside. As you can see, it's just a piece of plastic with a small retainer washer here and a spring. And in fact, the trigger and the retainer washer are being kept attached to one half of the gun by this post here, which has been melted over the washer. Pretty primitive, but of course, as you can tell, it does work. Interesting. Okay, so that's one part. And then I was not in the least prepared for what I saw or see next. And that's this little circuit here. Now, I haven't opened the barrel itself yet, but as you can tell, there's a tiny little print board here, and it's constructed apparently around a CD4011 chip. Now I looked it up, and the CD4011 is a quad NAND gate, so a quad inverted AND gate, and each AND gate has 2 inputs and 1 output. I suspect they either use it as a sort of a signal buffer, or maybe to generate some sort of clean square wave signal. I'm not entirely sure, of course, since I don't have the schematic. In any case, if you look at the top of it, it's connected to this micro switch here, and through those wires to a photocell, I suspect, inside the barrel. So next, what I need to do is to open up the barrel, and to do that I certainly need to unmount a little screw, a tiny little screw up here, and a little nut on the other side, and then perhaps another screw somewhere, but I haven't found it yet, or maybe by pulling off the back cap here. As I suspected, in the barrel there is a photocell, and in fact in front of the photocell, which is here in the back of that small cylinder, there is mounted a red colored plastic lens, and I suspect that is to let through infrared, or maybe to filter out color and only let through red, which I suspect is the spectrum, or part of the spectrum where the photocell is most sensitive, so in the red spectrum. Either way, again, like I said, since I don't have the schematic, it's hard to tell. In any case, to disassemble the barrel, I had to take that tiny little screw out, and then I had to pull this off the back end of the barrel. So it's a sort of a clamp, really solid actually, a solid massive plastic clamp into which the two halves of the barrel are clamped together. So by gently, gradually pulling on it, I managed to pull it off the barrel. Okay, so let me see now if I can unmount the photocell. And yes, I can. And there it is, down there. That's the photocell. Okay, so and it's in the exact center of this small tube, and it's mounted on its own little dedicated print, or I should say PCB, and the PCB is sealed to the tube by I would say melting two plastic pins over the PCB, so over two holes of the PCB. And in fact, now that I have a good close look at the PCB, I suspect the photocell is really a phototransistor. You notice on the PCB the letters E on the left, B in the middle, and C on the right. So yeah, I think in effect this is not just a photoresistor, this is a phototransistor. And I guess they used that because those are probably much more sensitive and hence faster. Okay, beautiful. And there is a lens inside the barrel. Okay, and it's red true and true, so it is in effect a lens made out of translucent red plastic. Alright, I let the screws soak in vinegar, which is a very, very gentle way of eating